クーラー入れようか。
The documentary, The God Who Speaks, proves the Bible's reliability as the source of real truth and reinforces our belief in it as our firm foundation. Watch it anytime at stream.afa.net. That's stream.afa.net.
Faith and Finance is thankful for support from The Good Investor, a book by Robin John. In his book, Robin shares his journey from an immigrant child struggling in school to co-founder and CEO of Eventide Asset Management, a faith-based investment firm. This faith and work memoir seeks to inspire readers to view their work and investments as opportunities to honor God and bring blessing to the world. More information is available at goodinvestor.com. That's goodinvestor.com.
Rob West of Faith and Finance. I'd like to take a moment to ask you to consider investing in the ministry that you know as American Family Association. One way you can support AFA's efforts is through your estate planning. You can shore up permanent income for your retirement years while supporting the culture-transforming work of the American Family Association. Call 800-326-4543, extension 345, or visit afafoundation.net.
Are you a financial professional looking to grow your practice while offering advice that aligns with your Christian values? By becoming a certified Kingdom Advisor, you'll gain the biblical wisdom and professional credibility to serve clients who are seeking faith-based financial guidance. Each year, more than 75,000 people search for a certified Kingdom Advisor. Join our community and share your expertise with clients looking for someone who shares their faith and values. Start your journey today by going to kingdomadvisors.com/get-certified.
Well, that was fun and maybe slightly uncomfortable. Hey, I hope this series has been helpful to you. You know, the heart behind it is, as we explored the temperaments with Kathleen Edelman and began to talk about how God's wiring in you relates so heavily to your financial decision making, we wanted to unpack that further, knowing that these temperaments are God-given, but they do really break down, and we've seen this, going back, hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, even before Christ, that this shows up in different ways. And when we understand how we're wired and how we then view the world, but more specifically money, it allows us to understand ourselves and our decision making to the extent you're married or have a family, and helps you relate to others, perhaps understand how they're wired. And then money is not that source of conflict. We get that out of the way, and it can be what it was originally intended to be, as a good gift from God, and that is a tool to accomplish God's purposes. But there's so much that gets in the way of that. The culture and the messages of this world and the allure of wealth that has promises that it cannot live up to, and certainly also, just the wiring that we have, kind of how we view the world. And my hope and prayer is that as you begin to think through that and what that looks like for you, it will help you have a more healthy relationship with money in your own life, but also as you communicate with others. And so I hope you found this to be of value. By the way, if you want to go deeper on this topic, check out Kathleen's resource. I Said This, You Heard That. You'll find that at her website. Just search that, I Said This, You Heard That. You can also just go directly to ISaidYouHeard.study. That's ISaidYouHeard.study if you want to take the assessment and kind of go deeper into all the things we've been talking about the last several weeks. All right, we're going to turn the corner here, and we want to dive into what you're thinking about today in your financial life. Maybe it's how you relate to money, or perhaps it's something completely different. You're trying to get out of debt. You're trying to live within your means. You're thinking about investing for the future. Whatever you're wrestling with today, we've got a line for you. We're ready to tackle your specific questions. So call right now, 800-525-7000. Again, that number with lines open right now, you'll get right through. That won't necessarily be the case in just a few moments. 800-525-7000, and we'll head to those phone calls here in just a moment. In the news today, American Express is reporting that consumer habits are shifting this summer. Americans are pulling back on travel, but spending more on dining and everyday experiences. Analysts say this shift points to greater consumer care about where they allocate dollars. Airfare and lodging spending is down, signaling that many families are skipping big vacations and choosing more affordable getaways. Dining out, especially locally, is up, suggesting a preference for smaller, more frequent indulgences that feel rewarding but manageable, and perhaps part of it is that food costs are through the roof.
水持ってきたでしょ。
If I take my family of 6 anywhere, even if it's a counter service restaurant, we're not getting out of there without spending $100. It's just unbelievable these days. Thirdly, everyday experiences. We're talking entertainment and local activities. They're also gaining ground, possibly reflecting a desire to stay closer to home while trying to enjoy more family activities. This shift shows how people are prioritizing what matters most to them in a high-cost environment. Instead of saying no across the board, many are simply being more intentional, focusing on experiences that offer enjoyment and recreation without the logistical or financial stress of major travel. You know, that actually is a good picture of stewardship, using money purposefully, not impulsively. It's not necessarily about cutting out all the fun. It's really about choosing wisely. See, it's okay to enjoy the resources God entrusts to us. As I mentioned a moment ago, that is the design. Remember, we serve the God who created joy. He wants us to delight in his good gifts, including every aspect of his creation that, by the way, also includes money. And so we need to have that healthy relationship with money. God is our ultimate treasure. Money is a tool. We want to enjoy it, though, in a way that's wise and in a way that glorifies him and that fits within the context of our provision. We don't want to live outside of our provision, even though the world allows us to do that with something called debt. Hopefully this program each day encourages you in that direction. That's certainly part of why we're here each day. All right, let's dive into your questions today. We want to tackle those at 800-525-7000. Again, that number is 800-525-7000. You can call right now. Let's go to Texas. Hi, Art. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, hello. My question this morning, hear an awful lot about cryptocurrency. I'm just curious, what is your opinion? Get in it or stay away from it? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question, you know, and there's obviously been a lot of talk about it just because of the incredible rise in the cryptos and all the changes that we've seen, both from a regulatory standpoint, as well as, you know, what we've seen lately with just the most pro-crypto president that we've had.
そのあれ、まあ自分で手巻きだから 時計。
You have to understand, this is the big idea. There's a huge distinction between Bitcoin and everything.
今9時31分。
So at this
ちょうど。
stage, at least, Art, Bitcoin clearly stands
ちょうど。
apart
うん。
from the rest
いいじゃない。
of the
そしたら。
crypto industry. Secondly, I think the kind of the relatively new idea is that Bitcoin has reached critical mass and appears to be here to stay. And that's due to a couple of things. As I mentioned just a moment ago, the regulatory environment has completely reversed from being hostile to being welcoming. And then second, you know, we've got the first openly pro-crypto president in the Oval Office. And so all of that has led to, and this is big, the acceptance of Bitcoin in the form of ETFs, which has then opened the door to institutional adoption, which means now the big players with big money and influence are now allocating to Bitcoin. Now, your question is, so what does that mean for me as an individual investor? Well, let's do this. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, I'll talk about where this might fit in your portfolio. We're taking your questions today. We've got lines open. Call right now, 800-525-7000. Art, stay right there.
Faith and Finance is underwritten by Certified Kingdom Advisor Kevin Bruce with Align Investment Research, helping families across Collin County honor God by stewarding wealth with wisdom and purpose. Because true peace of mind comes from aligning wealth with God's design. Learn Learn more at align7.com or call 972-972-8465. 972-972-8465. Align is a registered investment advisor.
I would wager that his top news story is still that the free salvation through the blood of Jesus Christ is available to all. I wager that will be the top news story until that salvation is no longer available. You will have made your decision for eternity. He doesn't ask us to do anything he won't, and then he does above what we can possibly do.
Hear Todd Herman on A Disciple's View, weekdays 12 p.m. Central on AFR.
Faith and Finance is grateful for support from Sound Mind Investing. For more than 30 years, they've offered financial wisdom for living well. SMI provides step-by-step guidance for do-it-yourself investors, from those just getting started to those getting ready for retirement. More information, including a short video webinar on profit and peace of mind, no matter what's happening in the market, is available at soundmindinvesting.org.
We work, we earn, we save. But is that all there is? The book of Ecclesiastes gives us an entirely new perspective on money that impacts our day-to-day lives. Faith-Fi study, Wisdom Over Wealth, 12 Lessons from Ecclesiastes on Money, unpacks life-changing biblical truths about wealth, work, and contentment. This resource will help you grow in how you handle wealth with wisdom and deepen your trust in God. Purchase your copy today or place a bulk order at faithfi.com/shop.
The American Family Association's mission is to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of our culture. Our goal is to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. We stand on the biblical truth that all human beings, including the unborn, are created in the image of God and are endowed by Him with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Thank you for standing with the American Family Association.
Feeling burdened by credit card debt? As faithful stewards, we are called to manage our finances wisely. Christian credit counselors can help with a debt management program that allows you to pay off debt up to 80% faster, while honoring your commitments with integrity. Don't let debt hold you back from the life God has planned for you. Take the first step toward peace and financial freedom today. Visit ChristianCreditCounselors.org. That's ChristianCreditCounselors.org.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
Great to have you with us today on Faith and Finance here on American Family Radio. I'm Rob West. We've got lines open today. We're taking your calls and questions. That number to call to get in on the conversation with something going on in your financial life is 800-525-7000. That's 800-525-7000. Coming up in our next segment, Bob Dahl stops by with his weekly market commentary. Bob's our resident market expert. He's going to comment on the June CPI. That's the Consumer Price Index numbers we got last week. Where was it? How does that relate to the Fed's target? And what might that say about where the economy's headed, and more specifically, interest rates? We'll also get just his overall reading on the health of the markets and the economy. That's straight ahead with Bob Dahl, frequent contributor on Fox Business and CNBC, and our resident expert here joining us each Monday. Back to the phones. Before the break, we were talking to Art in Texas. He's asking about crypto. Is it safe? Should he stay away from it? Does it belong in his portfolio? And I was saying, Art, that just kind of from a high level, whereas a few years ago we had said, really, you just ought to stay away from it. It's the wild, wild west, and just really doesn't have any place in your portfolio. Although I was very clear that I felt like the blockchain technology was here to stay and had a wide range of applications out there that would be a part of our economy moving forward. But a lot has changed in the last couple of years, and even in the last 6 months. And I think that's both from a regulatory standpoint as well as the adoption. Our president mentioned the fact that we now have with Bitcoin ETFs, and I think there is a distinction between Bitcoin and everything else. I would leave the everything else category out, but there's now Bitcoin ETFs, which has brought institutional players to the table. Now, what does that mean for you in your portfolio? the way to think about it or to understand Bitcoin is to think of it as digital gold. For the first decade or so of Bitcoin's life, many users hoped it would become an independent currency that people could use to buy and sell outside the normal government money system. That view is mostly dead at this point. But what's replaced it is the current view of most investors, and that is that Bitcoin, like gold, is a store of value that can protect a person's purchasing power against, well, the constant debasement of government currencies. Now, I know that may sound a bit crazy to call an asset that routinely drops in value by 75% a store of value, but Bitcoin has scarcity built into its DNA. There's a strict limit of 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be produced, and that gives it the appeal to investors watching this debasement continually of fiat currencies by not only the US, but global governments and central banks. And so I think Bitcoin investors like it for a lot of the same reasons that older generations have enjoyed gold. It's a separate asset class that can resist the debasement, hold its value, while other forms of quote-unquote money become less valuable over time. So in light of it being seen as digital gold, then how does that fit into your portfolio? And I think it always comes down, just like any investment, to risk tolerance and position sizing. So if you look at it through the lens of gold, and this may put it into a much smaller percentage than you were thinking, but what I would say is consider diversifying a portion of your gold allocation into Bitcoin. And so you'll hear us say on this program that you probably don't want to have more than 10% in gold. And so what if you were to say, all right, I'm going to take 5% of my gold allocation and put it into Bitcoin? Now, again, it's fairly small. There's probably some listening saying, no, this thing is, such a great long-term investment. I want it to be a much bigger part of my portfolio than 5%. Well, that's up to you. I'm just recommending you keep it in the gold allocation, which means certainly no more than 10%. And if you have any precious metals, I would say maybe half of that 10% is to precious metals, and the other half is to Bitcoin for the reasons that I mentioned. But give me your thoughts on all that.
Well, here's what I think, Rob. I think that I don't like to invest in anything that I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't understand Bitcoin, and I don't know anybody that can really explain it like you can, how a corporation works and profitability and how profitability affects the stock price. When it comes to Bitcoin, it's really a big mystery. I don't get it. So I tend to say I'm out. I don't want it.
Yeah, that's fair, and I think that's a good rule of thumb there, Art, is I've said for a long time two things. Either A, if you can't explain it, or you don't understand it, don't buy it, or two, if you can't explain it to your mom, then you probably ought to pass. And so I think that's a good rule of thumb. Last week we talked about the great investor Warren Buffett, who's hanging up his career after 60 years, and he had a similar philosophy, and it was, he was criticized when he stayed out of the .com era because, at the time he was like, I just don't understand it. How can you put .com after your name and all of a sudden be worth 3 times the value? And so he missed some of that early run-up, but it's for the same reason. He said, I want companies with real sales and earnings that I can explain to anybody. And so I'm on board with you. I will say, if you want to understand it a bit more, there was an explanation given of what Bitcoin is that was the best I've ever heard. And I'm not saying you should listen to it for the purpose of buying it, but I think it would be helpful to listen to as an explanation just for your further education. And where you can find it, if you're on Truth Social, the president actually shared it yesterday. And it's a testimony before Congress of basically an expert in this area that explained Bitcoin, and the president's caption on the Truth Social post was greatest Bitcoin explanation of all time. And I listened to it yesterday, and I agree. I mean, it was fabulous in terms of bringing a real world explanation of what in the world Bitcoin is. in a way that I've never heard before. And so if you just, search for, either if you have True Social, go to the president's account and look. It was yesterday, about midday, I think. If you don't, just do an internet search. But that explanation, I think, might help get you a little further along in your understanding, okay?
I'm going to look for it. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely, Art. Call anytime, my friend. 800-525-7000 is the number to call. Let's go to Iowa. David, how can I help, sir?
Hey, Rob. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I got a question. I called you a while back, and I had run up some debt, and I considered consolidating. And talking about the metals you were talking about just a while ago, I had a few $1,000s in silver, and it wasn't at that time going up in value fast enough to cover the interest on my credit card debt. So I thought, well, I'm losing money. So I sold it, paid about 40% of my debt off, and I'm really hammering it down. I haven't consolidated yet, but I think I can get it knocked down in a reasonable period of time. But my question for you is, tithing. What do we do with tithing when we're trying to get debt free? I mean, I am tithing, but I pulled back a little bit, and I'm kind of conflicted about that. And I wanted to get your input.
Well, it's a great question. So let's do this. I'm up against a break here, but I love the heart behind this question, which is, how do I continue to honor the Lord? What is the right approach to my giving while I'm pursuing the idea of being debt-free, especially as it relates to credit card debt, which I love. So stay right there. We'll talk about it on the other side. We'll be right back.
Faith and Finance is underwritten by certified Kingdom advisor Kevin Bruce with Align Investment Research, helping families across Collin County honor God by stewarding wealth with wisdom and purpose. Because true peace of mind comes from aligning wealth with God's design. Learn more at align7.com or call 972-972-8465. 972-972-8465. Align is a registered investment firm.
By denigrating God, we have become the greatest nation on earth because we are a nation that acknowledges Almighty God to be the source of our values, our rights, our liberties, and that therefore we are accountable to Him. The Awakening on the podcast page at afr.net.
We're grateful for supporting Guidestone, whose diversified suite of investment solutions align with Christian values to create positive change in the world. More information is available at GuidestoneFunds.com/faith. Investing involves risk, including potential loss of principal. Carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of Guidestone Funds before investing. They're distributed by Foresight Funds Distributors, LLC, which is not an advisory affiliate or registered investment advisor, nor do they provide investment advice.
Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Today, put your heart into something that makes eternal impact. Heart for Lebanon is sharing the gospel and protecting girls from early marriage, child labor, and violence. Your gift of $114 helps reach 3 at-risk girls with hope and a brighter future. Give generously. Text FAITH to 98656. That's FAITH to 98656. Or visit faithfi.com/Lebanon.
Great to have you with us today on Faith and Finance here on American Family Radio. We're taking your calls and questions today at 800-525-7000. It's 800-525-7000. We're going to be headed to the phones here in just a moment to talk to Bob Dahl. Bob is our resident market expert. We're going to get his take on the economy and the markets as we begin a new trading week. But first, before the break, we were talking to David in Iowa. David is focused on paying down some credit card debt. He liquidated some precious metal holdings and paid off about 40% of it. He's working on the rest and just wondering, how do I handle my giving, specifically a tithe, during that time where I'm really laser focused on paying off the debt? And, he's pulled back a little bit on his giving. And, here's what I would say, David. First of all, giving shouldn't be motivated by guilt. We give because God gave to us. So as an overflow of our gratitude to Him, God's grace toward us should fuel our outward giving. And remember, Paul says in 1 or 2 Corinthians 9, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So everything you give should be just an overflow of your gratitude toward God, and ultimately should not be about any kind of legalism or checking a box. In terms of looking at kind of New Testament giving, I would say we're to give proportionately. Remember, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 16, in keeping with your income. So it should be proportional to what we have. We should give sacrificially. We should give cheerfully. And I think we should make it a priority. Proverbs 3, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all of your produce. Now, the amount, I think that's between you and God. And ultimately, if you're doing it with the right heart posture, again, not out of a have to, but a get to type of approach, I think that's the right approach. Now, if you are, and I heard a little bit of this in your question a moment ago, if you're really sensing a conviction around, you know what, the Lord is just convicting me that I need to continue the same level of giving, then I would say you lean into that and go for it. If, however, you say, no, I'm going to give proportionately, but this is a season where I'm going to dial back my giving because I want to, I really want to get out from under this debt so that I have even more to give. I don't think that's a wrong decision. I think that's, again, ultimately between you and the Lord. So what I would say is, first of all, check your heart. Why are you giving? Second, I would be on my knees saying, Lord, what would you have me to do? And third, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, so long as you really are praying through it, you're following the conviction the Lord is giving you, and that could take you in either direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And, I felt some guilt about getting into debt in the beginning, and God has made it clear, it's like, you know what, I'm not into guilt. You're forgiven. What are you going to do with what I'm giving you here forward? And it's a tough job paying off debt. It's a really tough job. But that is feeling, sacrificial to the point where my goal is that if I can get debt free, at least the credit card debt and all that, if I have a house payment, I'm not so worried about that as long as I can manage it. But then I'm free to give more. And that's what I'm really feeling. I get that from listening to you, Rob. I think it's the perspective of it all belongs to God. Yeah. So I feel a little guilt from, making mistakes and poor choices. But you know what? I'm not going to let Satan hold me down and keep me guilty about that, because I know that God is a forgiving God.
Yes. Well, there's no doubt about that. And I love what you just said there. Thank you for giving testimony to what God's doing in your life. And I can't wait to see how he's going to continue to allow you to manage his money, especially once you're out of debt, in a way that brings him glory and allows you to use money as a tool to accomplish God's purposes. Thanks for being a regular listener, David. If we can serve you in any way in the future, don't hesitate to reach out. God bless you, my friend. 800-525-7000 is the number to call. Bob Dahl is here. He's our good friend. He's our market expert. And Bob, here we go. Before we dive into the markets, though, any thoughts on that caller? I know giving and holding loosely what God has entrusted to us is a big part of your message for a long time.
No question about it. I thought your advice was spot on. And he said in his last response he felt some guilt over the debt. Yeah. And that's understandable. God doesn't want us to go there. And I'm glad he's going to try to pay that down so we can give more. His heart's in the right place.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, what are you thinking about, Bob? You start every week. I know with your seatbelt on, you're managing billions of dollars. That's a huge responsibility. What are you watching this week?
Earnings in particular. This is the big week for earnings, all kinds of earnings, including several of the Magnificent Seven. We had a start in the last couple of weeks, and earnings have been reasonably good. Financials always started off, and they had good results. Of course, we want to listen to what the companies have to say about all kinds of things. The housing market, which is hurting, consumers, which is slowing a bit, and AI, which is keeping growth moving.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Two things I want to hit on related to what you just said. First is housing, you said, which is hurting. Give us a little bit more color commentary on that. What specifically is hurting, and what are you looking for in the U.S. housing market, in the near term?
Prices obviously went up a lot, and they're backing off a little bit. Part of the problem is mortgage rates remain very firm because they don't key off Fed funds. They key off the curve out in time. And so mortgage rates are pretty high, and that's why you're seeing a slowdown in the amount and the number of transactions and some softening in prices. And because we don't think long-term interest rates are coming down a lot, we think those mortgage rates are going to remain fairly stubborn.
Yeah. Bob, we're not anywhere close to the environment we had in 2007, 2008, though, correct?
Absolutely, not even close. The credit problems there had their seed zone, and several years before that, we don't see that at all this time. That's one of the tailwinds to the economy and the markets is that we don't have, outside of the federal government, which is a pretty big exception, we don't have ridiculous levels of debt.
Bob, if we settled into a situation here where, mortgage rates had a 4 or a 5 handle on them rather than a 6 or a 7, which continues to incent savers because you're getting at least some, money back on savings, we're perhaps slightly below the longer term trend on mortgage rates. Do you feel like that would unlock a lot of what's going on in the housing market? And could you get comfortable with that, as a longer term place to settle out with mortgage rates?
Yeah, if we can get down to 4 or 5 from the current 6 or 7, that's a big change, as you know, Rob, and that would make us more sanguine on the outlook for real estate. So mortgage rates are key. Getting them down a couple hundred basis points is going to take a lot of work and a much weaker economy.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. You mentioned you're watching earnings this week, not the least of which is some of the Mag 7. You had a comment in your commentary for this week just around where we find ourselves with the S&P 500 price to earnings ratio. Give us that understanding.
Yeah. The current PE rate on the U.S. stock market is 24 times, PE of 24. For reference, the 30-year average is 17 times, so it's 7 points ahead of that, and plus or minus 1 standard deviation is 3 multiple points. So historically, we trade between 14 and 20 times earnings. 24 is nosebleed territory.
Yeah, so what does that mean, for you as a stock picker, just kind of moving forward?
It means you have to be really careful how much you pay for a stock, and you want to make sure the underlying earnings and, more importantly, cash flow is strong and growing. You got to be picky. When you can go out and buy whatever you're talking about at cheap prices, it matters